All right, today I thought I would do a video all about lilacs because I've been getting so many questions and we are at the peak of our bloom. We're just starting to slide over. So some of the earliest flowering varieties are starting to turn brown, so don't look at that. But we're gonna go pop around the farm. I wanted to share them with you before they're gone because they're such a fleeting flower. So we've got them planted in all different kinds of ways, in the ground, in hedgerows, in the landscape, and I'm gonna show you how they're growing here on the farm and then answer some of the most common questions that I've gotten when I've asked folks. So things like, how long does it take for plants to mature? How do I prune to encourage bloom, or my plants aren't blooming? How do I harvest them for the longest vase life? How do I propagate, and sources? So those are the things I'm going to be covering in this video. So if those are one of your questions, then stay tuned. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. Okay, so the first big question is, how long do lilacs take to establish? And I know that if you've planted them, in my experience too, if you plant them, they take a while to get going, but once they go, they really go. So I wanted to show you 3 examples that were planted the exact same time so you can see the difference. So part of it is variety selection. So this is a beautiful old variety called Beauty of Moscow, and look at this monster. This was planted 5 years ago, and we planted 3 of them in the flower beds around the studio. So these guys got extra good soil, extra good care, lots of water, and that's what they look like at about year 5. Now this is a variety called Ludwig Spaeth, and we have 5 plants. So we put 5 little plants in a clump and then planted them in sort of our lawn. You can see sort of a grassy area, and then mulched really heavily with compost. And look at the size of this monster. So this was also planted in the spring of 2020. And so you can see these guys are definitely rocking and rolling. But then we've got Wonderblue over here, which was planted the exact same time as the other 2, but you can see it's much shorter, still bushy and stocky. This has 3 plants in the planting area. I like to do that, plant a clump of them, because then it makes a bigger stand of plants and kind of a more robust showing. But this variety is shorter, and so you can see the difference in that in the size of the plant. So when you're researching varieties, definitely look up the mature height. That's going to tell you how big they'll eventually get. But you can see they're all very vigorous and bushy. It's just the kind of mature height. And all of these, when we put them in, they were 1-gallon pots. And but we were very good to like amend the planting hole with good compost and a nice balanced organic fertilizer. Then plant the plants, mulch really heavily around them with compost, and make sure that they're watered very well the first couple of years. So lilacs are known to be pretty drought tolerant, and they don't need a lot of fertility once they're established, because they're those plants that are around the old home sites, and they'll live well over 100 years. But if you want to get them off to a good start, you want to give them, you know, everything that they need to have a good start in life. And so you can see the size difference, the ultimate height, but all of them are nice and robust. But that's about what 5 years of growth looks like. Okay, I want to show you a few more varieties. So these were planted 4 years ago. So you can see plants aren't quite as robust, but they're getting there. And look at all of this new growth. So all of this fresh green growth, we've got about 12 inches of growth here. All of that has happened in the last month. So once they get going and they're happy, they get going. So this is a purple variety called Albert F. Holden, and it is really beautiful. So single purple flowers. But what I love about this one is that the back of the petals, the flowers stay kind of cupped, and the back of the petals kind of have this like lighter silvery quality. So when you stand back and look at the blooms, they almost look metallic. It's such a beauty. Now this one is not the easiest to find. Pauline Fiala. Let me show you this girl. She is a stunner. So flowers are super, super, super ruffled and doubly, and then they have those gorgeous kind of violet buds, and then they open to that really beautiful kind of, the centers are a little bit lighter. She's not quite as giving with the flowers, but it could be because we have a little shade from the tree. But overall, a happy plant and a beauty. So if you can track that one down, and then this one, you're gonna freak out. Okay, so the way I'm checking the label, so this is one of the ways that we keep, when we have a plant collection, you can see we've got the metal label in here. And it's funny because this was way taller than the plant when we planted them. So this is Paul Theron. We get these labels from Pawpaw Everlast. And Paul is a stunner. So see those big fat violet buds. And then as they open, you've got kind of a 2-tone flower. And then as the flowers fully mature, they're just like big ruffled ribbons, almost kind of coiled up. So this is another total gem that I really love. Okay, so here we are out in the hedgerows. So we have nearly a mile or a little over a mile of hedgerows that we planted on the farm. And these were planted at the same time, so about 5 years ago, as the ones that were planted up by the studio and in the grass. And so a hedgerow is a mixed planting of shrubs and small trees that is to attract songbirds, provide nesting ground, and also food for pollinators. And we're doing a bunch of different experiments with hedgerows where we're mixing native plants with ornamental plants and just doing a lot of combinations and seeing what works well. But lilacs are a great thing to include in hedgerows, so far we've found. But you can see these were planted slightly different. So plants are much closer together, and we've got lilacs in here. So we have a beautiful white one called Madame Lemoine. And then we also have Beauty of Moscow, which we saw up by the studio. But you can see the plants aren't quite as big, if I stand in there, as they are up where they're getting a little more care. So in this situation, we prepared the soil. So we did compost, fertilizer, planted the plants, mulched heavily with wood chips, and then irrigated and did nothing else. It just kept it weeded. And so these haven't gotten quite the same kind of babying, and they're also planted a lot closer together with other things, so they're having to compete for light and some nutrients, and so still doing very well, but not quite as massive and showy as those ones up there. But I just wanted to see a different way of planting them. So we've got them in here with some beautiful crab apples, some 9 bark, more crab apples, Weigela, so lots of different flowering shrubs, and they make a great ingredient to include. And look at these beauties. The fragrance, like when the sun comes out and hits this, it's just like, and then look, there's the very first little rose coming. So as soon as the lilacs finish, the roses are going to go and the spirea is happening, and it's going to be stunning. Okay, one more example of how to plant. So this is kind of the area where everybody has lunch during the nice weather. We come out here, and so we've hedged this whole space in for kind of just like serenity and quiet. This is all Portuguese laurel, and we planted that, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. And this was from Instant Hedge, and I thought that place was a scam, and it wasn't, and it worked so good. And you can see how tall the hedge is. But then we also wanted to plant a secondary kind of inner hedge of lilacs, so it would be beautiful and fragrant. And also we just needed to find a place to put more plants. So these guys are planted about 4 feet apart, maybe 4 to 5 feet apart. And we planted 3 small plants like in a triangle, and then they're going to get mulched here with compost when Francisco's got time. But this is a beautiful variety. This is Nadezhda. We've got Sister Justina, which is a beautiful single white, not super tall. These lilacs were put in the ground about 3 years ago, so you can see the size difference. As things mature, they definitely get bigger. This is Paul Theron, which we saw, which was much bigger over by the house. Charles Joly, Vesper's Song, which is one of my all-time favorites. Oh no, this is Nadezhda, also a favorite. It's a beautiful, look at this. Look at these beautiful flowers. They're all ruffly and they fold back on themselves. But this is a way, like if you wanted to do a kind of a screening hedge and you had some extra room, you could see that eventually as these get larger, they're all going to grow in and sort of touch each other. And then we've got drip irrigation down below, but this is a great way to kind of screen in an area and then also have lilacs for harvesting. Okay, so lots of questions about how to propagate lilacs. So I know that you can take cuttings, and that is how a lot of the plant propagators do it. You can also do tissue culture, but I don't know how to do either of those yet. So once I learn cuttings, if I ever figure it out, I'll definitely share how to do it with you. But the way that I've always done it up until this point, and most people propagate lilacs, is through runners, or like these little, you could see these guys are sprouting. So this is Paul Theron. And you can see there's like little shoots coming out. So the plants are about 3 years old, and they're starting to send out little suckers. So if we get the quackgrass out of the way, see all those? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then if I lift it, see under there, there's all these little roots forming. So what I could do if I wanted to propagate this, I could snip it off here, take this, and then pot that up and baby it, and then these guys are going to start to grow, and they're going to be an exact clone of the mother plant. Or you could leave it in the ground a little longer until these shoots get more, sturdy and stiff, and then propagate, then dig them up. But this is how you can do it through kind of runners. Put that guy back in there. But there are I count about 8 of them. So on a 3-year-old little clump of plants, I've got 8 little babies that I could make. Now, not every variety sends out runners or suckers, but a lot of them do. And that is how traditionally lilacs were propagated. Okay, lots and lots and lots of questions about how to get lilacs to last in the vase, and I know a lot of people struggle with this. So there's a couple of things that you want to keep in mind. One is time of day. So you know how they always say pick flowers in the coolest morning or the evening, and you don't always have to do that with everything, but with lilacs it is actually important. So I always cut them in the coolest part of the morning when the flowers have the most water uptake, they're the most hydrated. It really does make a difference. Now the second is the stage of harvest. So you can pick the flowers when they're fully open like this, where there are no buds still closed. But it is going to make them, they're not going to last quite as long as if you pick them when they still have some buds that have yet to unfurl. So this is kind of the perfect stage in my opinion. We have about a third to half of the flowers are still closed. And then these other ones are starting to open, and I think this is the ideal stage to harvest. You don't want to pick them when it's all in bud, or I've found that the flowers just don't ever open. And so you want to go 50 to 75% of the flowers open, and then you can pick it. And if it's later and they're already open, it doesn't matter. It's just this gives you a little bit more vase life. Okay, so when we're cutting, everybody is always so afraid to be ruthless or aggressive or greedy or whatever, some negative term, when it comes to harvesting, and they don't want to hurt the plant. But the thing is with lilacs is if you don't cut hard, eventually the blooms are going to be so high up on that plant, you're not going to be able to see them and you're not going to be able to get to them. And so if I pick really hard and I pick long stems, next year the flowers are going to be at a good height. But if I just keep letting these grow and grow and grow, then I'm never going to be able to get to the blooms. So you can see here, this guy, we've got this stem. So when you're harvesting, rather than cutting here and being afraid, we're going to go all the way down here. We're going to be greedy, and it's going to be okay. And then the plant is going to do really, really well. So here's a spot. Let me show you an example. Here is a spot where I cut last year. So I chopped right there, and you can see then 3 new smaller stems emerged. And so wherever we cut, we're going to be getting new flowering stems. So don't worry about kind of overdoing it. Once the plant is established, it can handle it. So when I make a cut, I want to be intentional about where I cut. So you can see all these little kind of swollen little growth nodes. That is where leaves are going to come out. They haven't pushed out yet, but they will be coming. So when I cut, I want to cut above where a set of leaves is going to come out. So I'm going to chop there. I'm going to take this one. So rather than going up here and being afraid, let's be brave and go down here. Chopping that guy. We're going to do the same here. Chopping that guy. And I know this looks harsh and the bush is going to look like crap for, I don't know, a month or so. But then I'm going to be able to reach the flowers next year. It got its annual pruning. Okay. And then let me show you. So these ones I picked here in a second ago, but one of the next things I do as soon as I pick, I remove as much or all of the foliage as I can. I know it doesn't look quite as pretty to not have the leaves on, but when that stem is trying to keep everything hydrated, all of that lush new growth, if it has to keep that hydrated as well as the flower, it's going to have so much of a harder time getting everything to stay, perky and upright. It's going to wilt. So I just take off pretty much all the leaves. I mean, you could leave one, but I'm just going to take them off. So then I've got all those. Is that just so beautiful? Wish you could smell these. Okay, so then at the bottom of the stem, we want to make sure, so you can hammer them. A lot of people do that. That's what I did when we were kids. But I like to now just slice up the stem with some good heavy duty pruners. And so there's more surface area that can drink up that water. And then I want to get these into water pretty much right away. So it's not something I would lay in a pile in the sun. I want to get these freshly picked into cool water in a cool kind of dark spot. Let them sit for a few hours before I arrange with them so they get nice and hydrated. And then I can make bouquets with them. You can use quick dip, you can use floral preservatives. You know, there's a lot of tricks like that, which does help a little bit. But I found that really it's the time of day and the stage of harvest and then getting them into water right away that makes the biggest difference. And then when you display them, make sure that the big jug of lilacs, whatever, isn't sitting in a sunny window, because that sun beating down on it really will wilt the flowers. And then one last thing, if you're going to shape your plant, you've got to do it before, they say, the 4th of July, because that's when new flower buds initiate for next year's bloom. And so if you want to do any kind of pruning, you should be doing it between now and I would say the end of June. And so that's why it's great to just harvest hard. Just pick all the flowers and then you've shaped the shrub. But if you go through and you harvest or you prune in August or September or October, when we would normally like prune a shrub, you're essentially just cutting off all of next year's flowers. So with lilacs, they're specific like that. So cut hard, do your pruning, you know, in the next month or so, maybe 2 months, and you're going to be rewarded with a nice, beautiful, showy shrub where you can actually see the flowers. Okay, so here's the last stop on our tour. This is the plant nursery, and so this is a whole bunch of baby lilacs that I ordered this spring from a mail order nursery in New York called Hope Springs, and they are doing so well. Everybody was freaking out when I was unboxing. So I've already been a customer of Hope Springs. I found them last year and bought pretty much 2 of everything that they had available. And then this spring, when she listed her availability, I got 5 of everything. So I've got a lot of lilacs from her. But I saw there was a notice on her site saying that she was going to be closing up the business later this year. And of course I panicked, so I ordered more. And then I told all of you about it, and everybody else panicked, and we sold her out. And so I think she might be reconsidering closing the business. So that is really, really good news. But sourcing lilacs has become incredibly difficult in the last couple of years. They've just, all of the specialty nurseries and the folks that were doing this they're aging out. They're passing away, they're retiring. They just can't keep doing it anymore. And so the sources that we have are just drying up so quickly, it's not even funny. So Hope Springs is the last retail mail order source in the United States that I'm aware of that specializes in the rare heirloom lilacs. So she is it. So I would get on her newsletter and sign up, because she does send out a newsletter when plants go available, and I bet she'll be restocking this autumn. Other sources I would check, just Google Floret's favorite plant and bulb sources, and I've listed everywhere I've ever ordered from, so you can kind of go down that rabbit hole. Here in Washington State, if you're within driving distance, Christensen's Nursery has a lot of plants available. They have about 15 to 20 different French cultivars in larger pots. Plants are awesome, really beautiful varieties. There's also the Holden Lilac Garden, I think that's what it's called. And it's down in Woodland, Washington, which is on the Oregon-Washington border. And they're open for another maybe 2 weeks. And they have a whole bunch of plants there, so probably about 30 varieties. But you have to go, they don't ship. They're in small pots. I would definitely check them out if you're local. And then if you're on the East Coast, Cherry Valley Lilacs only does in-person sales. They're selling the farm this year. They have one of the largest private collections in the country. So if you're looking for a lilac farm, you could buy theirs, but they're doing their last plant sale. So I would definitely, if you're within, a day's worth of driving, I would go and get a U-Haul and buy as many plants as you can. So it's just real hit and miss. So if you see any lilacs anywhere, I would just get them, because it's getting harder and harder to find them. So as I learn more about them or find any news sources, I'll definitely be updating our website and I'll be sharing about them. But they're just such special plants. They're so nostalgic. They just have so many great qualities. They're fragrant, they flower in the spring, they're easy to grow, they're drought tolerant. There's just so many things to love about them. And so I say we try to save them, because they're not going to go extinct, but gosh, I hope not. So yeah, hopefully this video inspires you to add a few lilacs to your garden and gives you some tips and tricks for growing them better. And yeah, hopefully I've gotten you hooked.